Scott Braddock, editor of QuorumReport.com. Scott, how are you today?
Doing really well. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And,
Of
I think the governor got a little overshadowed by the Dallas Mavericks and Luka. I don't think he brought it up during his State of the State address.
No, and of course, I think the timing on that would have prevented him from being able to do so. But I did see that some people were asking, can he still add emergency items? And this is just a point of information. Which, yes, he can. If he wanted to add an emergency item, asking the legislature to pass something to prevent the trade of Luka, I guess they could give it a shot.
I mean, they could. Why not?
Well, somebody said to me, well, wouldn't that be unconstitutional or outside of the bounds of what state government's, allowed to do? And I said, well, it wouldn't be the first time the Texas legislature passed something that had, questionable constitutional, muster.
Right.
I just don't know that I don't know that would matter. Although, let me tell you something. It kicked off an interesting debate about the politics around gambling. I know this is not what we were talking about, but it's interesting. So you may have seen some chatter online. People were saying, well, wait a minute, isn't this really just a purely business decision? Because obviously the Mavs fans all hate this. But this has to do with saving the team a whole lot of money. I would remind people of this. The new owners of the Dallas Mavericks, of course, are the Adelsons, Sands Corporation. And, these are operators of casinos. You know this as well as anybody, Chad. You know it like I know it. Casino operators are pretty used to making unpopular decisions, and their customers just come anyway, right? It doesn't even matter. So that might be speak to part of their mindset. But some folks are saying, look, this may be a situation where, you might have the ownership of the Mavericks positioning all this ahead of another legislative session where casino gambling is going to be debated. And they might be able to create some leverage here because there's all this talk of the Mavs moving to Las Vegas, which, of course, is where the Sands Corporation just sold their casinos here, within the last year or two. So it seems like they're trying to get out of that market and not trying to go back. But I heard all of this chatter, and I thought, well, the whole argument seems predicated on the idea that the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, would give a damn about the Mavericks leaving Texas. And, of course, he's a Houston guy, and I don't think that he would care very much about that. So probably, isn't a real deal. But I wouldn't put it past, some of these power players to,
I got to be honest. I don't even think the Adelsons had any clue. I think it was the GM. They've given all the power to the GM. They don't know. They don't know basketball. They're just like, just don't lose all of our money.
People. Let me push back on that a little bit. It's not that you're wrong, but I do think that there could have absolutely come an order could have come down from the ownership saying, we really need to cut costs here, and they may have some reasons for that they don't want to state.
Yeah.
And so the GM probably have some marching orders on that, because if you look at just the fan reaction, I mean, the way one of my buddies in Dallas said it, big Mavericks fans said, they just wrote off their entire fan base. Everybody pissed about this, and they're not like not like some of the other franchises, right? I mean, with the Dallas Cowboys, as you know, they could do anything. And it doesn't matter. The Dallas Cowboys football is like religion. It doesn't. I mean, the big winner, of course, out of all this is Jerry Jones, because people aren't complaining that he just made the stupidest decision in sports, which he does now and then, in the opinion of a lot of people. So anyway, they're probably celebrating over at Cowboys headquarters.
Oh yeah, Jerry needs to send the Mavericks some flowers and a thank you card.
Yes.
and get ready for the draft.
Early Valentine.
Well, what did happen during the governor's State of the State address?
Well, he laid out quite a few emergency items, and as I described on the show last week, it's not that I'm always careful in the way I say this, Chad, because it's not that people are ignorant or stupid or don't know what they're talking about. It's just that these terms can be a little, it's not even deliberate, but they can be kind of confusing, right? When people hear the word emergency item, they think that means it's an emergency, like, firefighters are going to go down a pole and go out and put out a fire. It's not an emergency in that way. The fact that we should probably just say it this way. The governor laid out his priorities.
Sure.
Right, for the legislative session. I think that's a fair way to say it. And I will tell you that none of these surprised me. Did they surprise you?
No.
He talked about property tax relief. Check. He talked about water infrastructure investment, especially in West Texas. Check. He talked about pay raises for teachers. Check. Career training. Check. Education savings accounts. We all expected that, so check. Bail reform. That's been kind of his white whale. really. Long before he was interested in school vouchers, bail reform. He's been trying to get that done, and I think that is probably dead on arrival in the House, because that's a constitutional amendment thing, and of course they need 100 votes for whatever they're going to do, and they just haven't been able to put that together. So we'll see what they do. I do know, and I may have mentioned this on the show before, but some of the advocates who have worked really hard on bail reform in the state, they have told me that when it comes to that issue, unlike others, it is one where the governor personally and his staff roll up their sleeves and really try to hash out the policy with lawmakers. And that's just not the case across almost any other issue, including school vouchers, by the way, which, of course, he's become so adamant about the last couple of years. And then there was a priority of the creation of a Texas Cyber Command. That might seem out of left field to people, but shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, cyber threats are one of the things that we're most concerned about in this new global economy with all of the, as far as, real threats. People are so concerned about the Chinese government, infiltrating the United States and gathering intel on people through TikTok. And then what a great fake out by the Chinese government to get so many people to sign up for the actual Chinese version of TikTok when they, I think they were only offline on TikTok for about 12 hours, something like that. So a lot of concern about that. None of these surprise me. But none of these, as I said, with the bail reform and potentially some of the other things he talked about, I don't think that any of these are guaranteed. One of the things that he talked about when it comes to property taxes was the idea that any time a local government's going to raise your property taxes, if there's a proposal for that, then it would have to be voted on by the people who live in that city or that county or that school district or whatever. And Abbott was saying that if you don't get a 2/3 vote of the people in favor of raising taxes, then it can't happen. I'm working this out right now, Chad, but I do think that that's also a constitutional amendment question at the state level, and so probably would require 100 votes in the House. I don't think he's going to get that, and so some of these things dead on arrival. Other things, he's going to really put his nose to the grindstone and continue to, sort of threaten and cajole those Republican members who are definitely against. I mean, there are still some of them in the House, right, who are against his school voucher program. He did tell the Dallas Morning News this afternoon, and we made note of this on the Quorum Report website just a little while ago. Abbott told the Morning News' reporter, Gromer Jeffers, essentially that he's going to veto any school voucher bill that's not universal. And as you know, what's been proposed so far isn't, right? And we don't know exactly what the House version of it's going to look like. I do think that on vouchers, and this is from some of my sources in the Capitol, who are, intimately familiar with what may happen, although no predictions. But this is a pretty good idea of where it might go. That the Senate's going to move really fast, as you know, but the House may take some time to craft whatever their school voucher legislation is, because I think that, and again, this is the way it may play out, Chad, is that the House may first want to go ahead and pass the budget first. The House leadership may want to do that because whatever ends up in that budget, for specifically on the question of school vouchers, will help to inform what their proposal looks like. So there's a long way to go on all that stuff.
Speaking of the House, where are we as far as committee assignments go?
Nowhere yet. And you remember last week there were some rumors that the House committee assignments might be released as soon as last Friday. Of course, the Speaker Burrows, said no, that wasn't going to happen. So I would expect, and again, no predictions, but I would expect those assignments to be released as early as this week. That last week the members of the House all turned in their requests that they basically, will ask the Speaker to be able to serve on certain committees. The Speaker's office will consider those requests along with what they call seniority appointments and try to figure all that out. It is a huge task to figure out, which powerful committees and some not so powerful committees that all of the 150 members of the House are going to serve on. And so I think that the Speaker's office, wants to at least give the members a sense that their input was valued and that those decisions aren't being made too quickly. I know there are those out there saying that, this is so crazy that they're not on the House floor working and they're wasting your time on your taxpayer dime. But I would say, first thing is, members of the House don't have to be on the floor to be working. They're in their offices. They're working on legislation. They're filing bills, and they're getting they're getting ready for battle, right, for all the different things that they want to pass. And they're building relationships. And one of the wise old men at the Capitol once said it this way, Chad. This part of the legislative session, the beginning, is the part where the lawmakers and the lobbyists and Governor Abbott, the Lieutenant Governor, all those folks. This is the part of the session where they build up relationships that they will later burn to the ground. And we've seen that happen over and over again.
You walked right into my next question, which was some of the rabble rousers on X. Are saying that that nothing is happening, which again, like you said, that's not true. There are things that are going on behind the scenes. But I mean, you have been you're a long-time watcher of the House. I mean, this seems to me like the House is on track for basically on track for what the House always does. And again, we can take it up with that little law out there that says they can't pass anything within the first 60 days unless it's an emergency item.
Right.
But other than that, there's other work that's being done, right?
Absolutely. And, the comparison is always made by those rabble rousers, those folks, I call them the ankle biters. They're saying that the Senate is organized and already doing all its stuff. The committees have been assigned, in the Senate, and in the House we're waiting. But the easy way to understand it and think about it is in the House there are 150 members. And as I said earlier, it's a big task to figure out where to place all of those people on committees where they can be the most effective, not just for their districts, but also for the whole state. You're looking for people to serve on committees who have some expertise in the different subjects that they're going to tackle in those committees. And so the Speaker's office needs to take the time to try to get that right. And it's one of those things, just like in sports, it's one of those things where, no matter how they do the assignments, there are going to be people who say, oh, they didn't do this right, they didn't do that right. It's more art than science. That's 150 members. In the Senate, there are only 31 members. And it's a lot easier for the lieutenant governor to figure out where to put those basically 30 people. And also think of this, in the Texas Senate, they did have some turnover, but not very much.
Very
right?
little.
I mean, there weren't, right. And so the fact that the lieutenant governor already knew essentially which senators he was going to be working with, he would have known that a year ago. There wouldn't be a whole lot for him to think about when he's handing down those assignments. Not that they weren't thoughtful, but it just is not the same kind of task. Making the comparison with the Senate is, I would say, is flawed at best and dishonest at worst.
Scott, it's something that I've noticed. The governor has had some praise for the Speaker. I had there was a there was a kind of a conference call, if you will, where the governor's people were asked what's the relationship like between the Speaker and the governor, and I believe it was Dave Carney who spoke up and said it's great, it's a good relationship, always has been a good relationship. Okay. Even the lieutenant governor, while the lieutenant governor will say, I disagreed with the way Burrows got there, he's kind of leaving that door open, but he's kind of leaving that door open to where, hey, and I think he's even said, I know Burrows is a conservative guy, but ... Do you think that there is a chance that the big three, they've already had breakfast together, do you think that there's actually a chance that this is a better working relationship over this, over this session than we have seen between the Speaker and the other big two in the past couple of sessions?
It's possible, but only if they all work at it. And I think that what Patrick is doing by sort of putting pressure on Burrows in making the argument that, he was elected with Democrats, he has Democrats in his coalition, and he has to have their support. Patrick says a version of that all the time in interviews lately, but then he immediately follows that up with what you said, which is he says, I'm going to give him a chance to be what he said he's going to be, which is the most conservative speaker ever. What he's really trying to do with that is push Burrows to, support the things that Patrick wants him to support. And so I think for Abbott and for Patrick, they both, their leadership styles have been, centered around trying to instill a certain amount of fear in Republican members of the House. to be compliant with what they want to do. But it's still a deliberative process, and the job of the Speaker is just harder. He's elected by the members of the House who have very different constituencies, even within the Republican caucus. People who represent Lubbock, they've got different interests, from the people who represent, parts of Dallas County or Houston. And so across issues, they have to be a lot more collaborative in the House. And that's why being the Speaker, it's one of the reasons that being the Speaker is one of the most thankless jobs in Austin, if not the most thankless, because that person becomes the face of what all those ankle biters call the swamp. And they'll be attacking him no matter what, really, again, to compare it to sports like we were talking about before, no matter how Burrows handles it, there's going to be those critics out there who are going to say, oh, he could have done this, he should have done that, they should have been moving faster or whatever. None of those people have ever dealt with the kind of job that he's having to deal with.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important, too. One of the last interviews that I saw with the lieutenant governor, he said that he'll judge it based off of, he said that we'll judge it based off of what he passes that we send to him. And it's one of those where that's never been the relationship between the House and the Senate. There's always been that the House just doesn't rubber stamp what the Senate usually sends, and so that's something to watch for. Scott, what else can people find over at quorumreport.com?
We're covering everything happening with your state government. It's go time. The legislative session has been moving along, and they're going to hit the gas pretty soon. You won't want to miss a minute if you go to quorumreport.com. You click free sign up, and that's how you stay in the loop.
All right, very good. Scott, as always, appreciate your time. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Chad. Talk soon.
All right.